In for the most unpredictable general election race, British Prime Minister David Cameron, as we just indicated, is now certain to retain his position in his office as the country's Prime Minister. Now, to discuss the elections, we are joined in studio by economist Professor Raymond Parsons from the Northwest University Business School. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome.
Hi, Elvis.
What do you make of the UK elections?
Well, I think to start with, what I must say that the biggest casualty is, of course, the opinion polls. They really got it very wrong. And they will have to do as much of a post-mortem as some of the political parties. It's important because, apart from the fact that you want opinion polls to be more accurate, so if they go wrong, one is concerned. But it has had, prior to the election, the consensus did have some implications for the financial markets and for investors. They got a bit perhaps jittery about what might happen in the United Kingdom with the unpredictability of a stable government and so forth. So quite clearly, I think that was the first casualty. The second point is to say that the latest figures indicate that the Conservative Party will get 326 seats, which gives them a majority of one, if all the seats come through. So to that extent, you have the prospect now of a stable government.
Because that was going to be my next question. Will that lead to stability?
Yes, simply because one party at least has a simple majority. That doesn't mean to say that governing will necessarily be easy. But then once again, you might find, because they have to provide a speaker and one or two other appointments, so to be on a majority of one is not ideal, obviously. But it puts you in a very strong position, of course. So what you might find is that that the Conservatives and the Liberals may go back into a coalition, because those 10 seats, which it appears that the Liberals will get now, although it's down from the substantial...
From 57.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Would just put Cameron into a safety zone, much more of a comfort zone when he has to get certain things through Parliament. I think from an economic point of view, I mean, as you rightly said, this is the second largest economy in Europe. It's the fifth largest in the world. We have huge export markets there. So naturally, I think we've had a great interest in stability and in the growth of the UK economy. Now, I think what I've divined from some of the interviews I've seen this morning with the Chancellor of the Exchequer, he's saying, look, they now have a mandate to continue with the recovery of the British economy, which is one of the fastest growing in the EU at the moment, after the financial crisis. So quite clearly, there will be continuity and stability now, that the better performance of the UK economy could now, of course, continue, that the sort of policies they are following will in fact send out the right signals to investors, to the financial markets, that their worst fears, that there might be unstable government, are not going to be realized. So I think that from that point of view, it's a positive message for the business community of the United Kingdom and for the business community of South Africa, who have a stake in the welfare of the UK economy.
What is that stake of South Africa in the UK economy, and how will it affect us in any case if the Conservatives come to power?
Well, I think the point is that because our export markets, it's one of the top 10 of our export markets. We also, of course, get a lot of foreign direct investment from the UK. Not that that would have been affected even under a Labour government. There would have also been certain continuity there. But it was the instability element, the fact now that if the UK market is going to grow, because their gross domestic product is going to grow, because they're going to pursue the right policies, the right growth policies, the right fiscal policies. They're not going to put up interest rates just yet. And I noticed also overnight that sterling has strengthened. So that's also a signal that what they feared, or at least what the opinion polls feared, is not going to happen. And now it will be up to Mr. Cameron to see how he can work with a very small majority and carry out his mandate.
But there are a number of questions of the UK's future in their role in the EU, as well as the issues of the Scottish independence, although there was the referendum there, and the maintenance of a single UK economy. Your thoughts?
Yes, those are two longer-term structural issues. I think the clouds have cleared for the short term from the economic point of view as far as the United Kingdom is concerned. But I think if you look into the longer term, there are some structural issues which are peculiar to the UK economy, which they'll have to deal with. Two of them is, of course, the issue of Scottish nationalism. Can they maintain a single economy over the longer period? I would just ask one to bear in mind, this is where the opinion polls went wrong. UKIP, for example, has got 12% of the vote and 2 seats. Now, the Scottish National Party have got 7% and 50 seats. So you see, there are when you're asking where the mandates are, you have to bear that in mind. But quite clearly, the issue of wanting to maintain a single economy, even though you may have devolution of power at a political level, is one of the structural issues that will have to be dealt with. And the second is, of course, this referendum. I think the Conservative Party itself would want to stay in the EU on the right conditions. And I think that's where David Cameron's coming from, but he feels he needs to test the electorate. He wants to get a better deal out of the EU to maintain the common market, and obviously he then wants to be able to go to his country in 2 years' time and say, well, I think we should stay in. And that's important, of course, for our own business strategies, because whether you have a United Kingdom inside the EU or outside will also have implications for South Africa when that point arrives. So it's something we will have to continue to watch, because this remains an important market for South African business.
And those implications that you're talking about, what could be some of them?
Well, I think you would find that market shares will shift to some extent. I mean, we also have been diversifying. We're not putting all our eggs into the European basket anymore. We're looking at Asia and other parts of the world. That's very important, because that's part of the shift in the balance of power that is taking place in the global economy, and we must make sure that we're well positioned when these other shifts take place, like, for example, the position of the UK in the EU and so forth, which one hopes will continue. I think it's a win-win situation on the right terms. And for us, it would also be a win-win situation. So I think it's very important that we look at that carefully, but for the time being, we've been assured of a high degree of political stability and continuity in the policies that will be followed in the United Kingdom, and which hopefully will be good for their economy and for our share of it.
There was indication that the elections could have an effect on investor confidence. Your take?
Well, I think now, in the light of the fact that, just one small barometer is the fact that sterling has risen strongly in the last few hours, suggests that whatever jitters there were in the financial markets have been assuaged for the time being, because if you looked at the opinion polls again, I think they were expecting a gridlocked situation with not being able to do anything, and that's not something that the United Kingdom has ever been used to. They've had minority governments, but they could operate for a while. But this was a very different combination and fragmentation of their politics, which could have set certain new economic risks up for investors. So I think the feeling is that in the short term, at least, you now have stability and continuity by the Conservatives having got back with at least a simple majority.
I normally do this, and I would like to ask you for your final comment, your final thoughts today.
No, well, I just think that South African business should now be prepared to say, look, we now know for the next 5 years where we stand politically in the United Kingdom, and therefore where we stand economically. So they really ought to exploit the situation. I really ought to say, well, what new opportunities will now arise for South African business? We have at least 200 companies who are visible in the United Kingdom. How do we carve out a bigger share for ourselves, given the fact that we now know where we're likely to stand for the next 5 years in the United Kingdom economy? So I think that's a positive aspect, and we should be prepared to take advantage of it.
Professor, as usual, thank you so much for your time and joining us here on AM News. Now, that was economist Professor Raymond Parsons joining us here in studio, and there's lots of opportunities indicated to you out there doing business from the University Business School in the Northwest.